We have now reached the end of the Marcum Damage Case. This case changed the course of political power in Breathitt County. It was also a trial that had not happened before or since, with the defendants being a state senator, 2 judges, and a county sheriff. What was scheduled to take place over 3 weeks ended up being a trial that lasted 5 weeks, with 1 week being taken for closing arguments. Come along with us, as there was a moment where the jury was hopelessly deadlocked, and the case would go to the Kentucky State Court of Appeals. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine, but it convinces YouTube that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The case goes to the jury. All of the witness statements had now been taken. All of the evidence had been shown. The jury instructions were now given, according to the Breathitt County News. Quote, drawing to a close. The taking of the evidence in the celebrated Marcum Hargis Damage Case was closed last Saturday. On Monday, after the instructions were read to the jury, J. Smith Hayes consumed the entire day in arguing the case for the defendants. He was followed by A. Floyd Bird, who took all day Tuesday in presenting the plaintiff's side of the case. On Wednesday, Attorney Stevenson spoke for the defendants and Attorney B. S. Jewlett for the plaintiff and McGowan for the defendant occupied all of Thursday. C. J. Bronston is making the closing argument for the plaintiff today, Friday. The case has been on trial for 5 weeks and is attracting a great deal of attention. The courthouse has been crowded at every session since the trial commenced, unquote. As we stated in our last video, the attorneys had gone before the jury and taken a week for their closing arguments. It was now time for deliberation of the facts in the Marcum Hargis Damage Case. The citizens of the United States were now on the edge of their seats, as the landmark case was now finally being decided. Possible mistrial. The case was finally in the hands of the jury, and this did not go smoothly. Just 2.5 hours into the deliberations, the jury was having issues. This is how Judge Benton helped his hopelessly deadlocked jury. On this matter, the Birmingham Age Herald reported, quote, jurors cannot agree. Judge Benton, however, refuses to discharge them. Winchester, Kentucky, January 7th, the testimony in the Hargis-Marcum damage suit was finished, and the case was given to the jury this afternoon. After deliberating several hours, they came into court and reported that they were unable to agree. Judge Benton refused to discharge the jurors and placed them in the hands of the sheriff and adjourned court until Monday. If the present trial ends in failure to agree, he will try the case again during the summer term, probably in July, as it consumes more time than is allotted to a regular term, unquote. The Big Sandy News would give a possible reason for the jury deadlock. Quote, after deliberating for 2.5 hours, the jury in the Marcum Damage Case was called by Judge Benton and the court was adjourned until Monday. The indications are that the jury is hopelessly disagreed and that the case will have to be tried again. The closing argument made by Attorney Bronson was a scathing arraignment of the defendants for the conditions existing in Breathitt County at the time Marcum was killed, unquote. So, was it because the plaintiff's attorneys and what they said that was really going on in Breathitt County, Kentucky, that caused the jurors to disagree? We can only speculate that it was a real possibility. We currently do not have a copy of what Attorney Bronson said to the jury, but it must have been something else for the jury to be deadlocked over it. The judge did not want to have to retry this case again, as it took 5 weeks, 2 weeks longer than expected to present all of the testimony and witnesses. So Judge Benton adjourned the court until the following Monday with placing of the jury in the custody of the sheriff. The verdict. When the jury returned on Monday, they had a verdict. It was really more of a compromise than an actual laying down of the law, as the criminal side of this case would begin soon. According to the Daily Public Ledger, quote, the jury in the Marcum case at Winchester returned a verdict for $8,000 against James Hargis and Ed Callahan jointly, and exonerated Alex Hargis and B.F. French from any connection with the alleged conspiracy to kill James B. Marcum. The plaintiff will appeal from the judgment in favor of Alex Hargis and B.F. French, and the defendants James Hargis and B.F. French is supposed to be Ed Callahan, as he was the co-defendant that was charged by the jury, will probably appeal from the verdict against them, unquote. Adding to this, the Bee continued this story, quote, it is announced that the defendants will now be indicted on the charge of conspiracy for the death of James B. Marcum, and that they will be prosecuted on this charge, unquote. The amount of $8,000 may seem very small, but if you were to take into account the money exchanged from 1905 until January 2024, that amount would be as much as $248,122.10. Accounting for the cumulative rate of inflation at 3,001.5%. This estimate does vary depending on the inflation calculator that is used. Concerning the trials from this point forward, several of the defendants will face charges of jury and witness tampering, bribery, and coercion. They will also face trial concerning the death of Town Marshal James Cockrell. The appeal. Even though the jury had made its decision, neither side was very happy about it and took the case to the Appellate Court of the state of Kentucky. This was allowed as Mrs. Marcum was not happy that Alex Hargis and B.F. French were also not named in the verdict. James Hargis and Ed Callahan felt that it was unfair that they were named, and this should have been an acquittal. According to the Bourbon News, quote, the Marcum case. The jury awarded her $8,000 against Judge Hargis and Callahan. They had been granted an appeal from this verdict to the Court of Appeals. Mrs. Marcum was also granted an appeal of the case, as it also affected Senator Hargis and Judge B.F. French. Curtis Jett, nephew of Hargis brothers, is serving a life sentence for the murder of Marcum. An appeal is pending in the case of the death sentence imposed for the assassination of Cockrell. Tom White is under life sentence for killing Marcum. Pending a decision of the Court of Appeals on a motion for rehearing, he is in jail at Covington, unquote. While there would be an appeals case, there would be no new trial. According to the Mount Sterling Advocate, quote, no new trial. Motions overruled in the Marcum Hargis damage suit. An appeal in each case is allowed. At Winchester, Kentucky, Judge Benton overruled the motion of both plaintiffs and defendants for new trials in the Marcum Hargis damage suit, and an appeal in each case was granted, and all parties given until April. He said he saw no reasons to change the rulings of the court or the instructions to the jury in any save minor points. He said if B.F. French was guilty of bribing or enticing witnesses away from the jurisdiction of the court, as contended by the plaintiffs, his conduct was most reprehensible, and the matter would be thoroughly investigated, unquote. This would happen as B.F. French would go before the court in Cynthiana to be judged for the crimes of bribing and enticing witnesses away, and also for witness and jury tampering, which will start off the criminal side of the trials in next week's video. The Appellate Court rules. In the middle of October in 1907, the final verdict in the Marcum Damage Case would be handed down by the Kentucky Court of Appeals. This was a victory for Marcum, as the jury's decision held and was not overturned. We are given the report by the Washington Times. Quote, Lexington, Kentucky, October 19th. Miss Aubrella Marcum of Jackson, Breathitt County, has been given judgment in the Kentucky Court of Appeals against Judge James Hargis and Sheriff Edward Callahan of Breathitt County for $8,000 in damages. Mrs. Marcum had sued Judge James Hargis, Alex Hargis, B. Fulton French, and Edward Callahan for $100,000 damages for alleged responsibility for the assassination of her husband, James B. Marcum, who was shot to death at the courthouse door in Jackson, May 4th, 1903, unquote. Later in the same article, quote, sends his check. Judge James Hargis of Breathitt County today sent a check for $5,600 to Bird and Jolette, attorneys for Mrs. Abrilla Marcum, as a part of payment for the $8,000 verdict which Mrs. Marcum obtained in Clark County Circuit Court against Judge Hargis and Sheriff Callahan for $100,000, claiming that these men had her husband, James Marcum, assassinated, unquote. So, according to the Kentucky State of Appeals, the verdict held. We have always said that you, as the 13th juror, should make up your own minds when it comes to a case. We present all of the available information that we can find concerning the case and try our best to present it in a neutral manner, in that we don't take sides and try not to let our views on a matter cloud the cases. It is our hope that we have succeeded in doing this. What do you think? Should Ed Callahan and Judge James Hargis been found guilty in the civil case and paid the money? Or do you think that B.F. French and Alex Hargis should have been charged? Do you think that the final dollar amount was just? Let us know what you think. Also, one would think that this had finally concluded the feud and everything legally would have been finished. Sadly, this was not the case. Because of the evidence that was handed over in this trial, the criminal cases would soon begin. The first of the cases to go to trial would be against Ed Callahan and B.F. French. We will begin with their charges and what happened to them afterward, beginning in next week's video. Thank you. We at Kentucky Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian feuds. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification button. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries in Appalachian history.